Um, Welcome to the May meeting of Norfolk Overview and Scrutiny Committee. My apologies for the delayed start, but we've had a few technical problems this morning with regard to the microphone system. So we are having to make do with handheld mic or two. We may have another one to be added. I've got one attached to me at the moment, and hopefully you can hear me okay. So it will mean that when you're not, don't have the benefit of a microphone, you will need to elevate your voice to make sure that it's picked up in some manner or form. Otherwise, the YouTube recording won't contain any information of your discussion. So it's about an acoustic meeting, I think we would probably call it, rather than an enhanced meeting. So with those limitations, we will proceed, and hopefully we'll have another microphone shortly. So welcome everybody to the meeting, and our first item on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence. I've got apologies from Councillors Housden, Varley and Spagnola. Is that correct? Thank you. Because I believe they were at last minute notice, we've got no substitutes taking their place either. Thank you, that's unfortunate, but there we go. Item 3 on our agenda is public questions and statements. I'm aware that we have one public speaker this morning in relation to an item on our agenda, which I believe is at 11, item 11. I've already discussed it with Mr. McEwen. Mr. McEwen, I think you have opted to speak at the beginning of that item rather than you speak now and then your statement be sort of in isolation from the item that we are going to when we get to that item. I'm sorry we're having to shuffle the agenda around this morning, but I think it would be right to get our item with the for our guests out of the way first of all, and allow them to move on after the will be dealing with the items in the following briefing. And then the urgent item of business, which I'll mention in a moment, that will follow after that. So there'll be a bit of a shuffling around this morning. So what with the sound system and the agenda system, it's going to have to be flexibility is the key to of our last meeting. Oh, right. Okay. Well, yeah. Maybe I'll attach it to somewhere nearer to my. One, two, three. Good. Splendid. That's more effective then. Yes, I can hear myself echoing around the place at the moment. Rather worrying, but never mind. Okay, so let's turn to the minutes then of our last meeting, which was the meeting held on the 6th of April, and we'll go through them for accuracy, page by page. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Are they a true and accurate record of that meeting? Are you comfortable that I should sign them as such? Could I have a show of hands, please? Thank you. That looks like unanimous to me. Thank you. Moving to item 5, items of urgent business. As I mentioned earlier, I have one speaker, Mr. McEwen, this morning, and we've agreed that that will be delivered at the beginning of the item 11. Item 6 is declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest in respect of today's business that we'll be considering? No? Okay, thank you. Item 7, petitions from members of the public. I'm not aware of any. Is that right? Thank you. Item 8, consideration of any matter referred to the committee by a member. Again, I'm not aware of any. Thank you. And item 9, responses of the council or the cabinet to the committee's report or recommendation. I'm not.
The one from the scrutiny panel recommendation in attendance at cabinet.
I was.
If you're able to report on that. Got to the bottom of that.
Yes, I can briefly mention that at the last cabinet meeting, the recommendation from the working group panel of this committee made recommendations to cabinet, and they were duly included in the work going forward in relation to the quality of life project. Right, moving then to item 10. Item 10 is our first substantive item on the agenda. It's Anglian water sewage outflow briefing. And I should just briefly say that this is an item that came to our attention from the November 21 meeting of full council, when we had a motion which expressed concern at the level on the frequency and the number of events to do with and the implications flowing from raw sewage discharges at various points around the district. And a recommendation was made to this committee that we should consider inviting or looking into the matter and inviting Anglian Water to give us a better understanding of what is going on and what you are doing in relation to remedying those situations. So I think at that point, if I can just introduce, we have here today from Anglian Water, Dr. Robin Price, who is the Director of Quality and Environment. And we have Mr. Grant Tufts, who is the Regional Engagement Manager. So without more ado, which of you would like to open? Over to you then.
Can you hear me okay? Marvellous, okay. No green light, so that's good news. Wonderful. So yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm Robin Price, Director of Quality Environment at Anglian Water, and thank you very much for your time this morning and for the opportunity to come along and talk to you today. We've got written answers for all of the questions. We're very grateful for the opportunity to kind of have questions in advance. So what I intend to do with Grant this morning is kind of run through very briefly some of the answers, but we'll provide you with the full set of answers by email. And we've also got a presentation which we're not going to show today, again, just in the interest of time, but again, we'll make that available for the minutes pack. But I think what I'm very keen to do is get into just a more general discussion and just take any other questions that we have from you and just anything else that's kind of concerning you that we can take back and anything we can do. So we'll just go very briefly through some of the questions, some of the answers to the questions that you've given us in advance, but then very keen to get any questions on the day and just get into a discussion, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman. So
we'll run on that basis.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So the questions kind of broadly kind of fit into kind of two sets. One's around kind of planning and around kind of future issues and kind of planning proposals. And then there's a lot of questions around kind of sewage overflows and storm discharges. I'm going to defer to Grant, my colleague Grant, who knows much more about planning than I do. And then Grant's going to hand back to me. Grant knows as much about sewage overflows as I do, but Grant's then going to hand back to me to talk about the sewage overflow piece. So we'll do a double act if that's okay with you. So hand over to Grant first for some of the planning questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Good morning, everybody. I think I've recognised a few faces, so nice to see you in person. I've sort of met you in the past, but on Zoom meetings, but generally getting out and about a bit more, so it's nice to come and see people again. So as Robin said, yeah, the questions that were submitted last week to us in detail covered a couple of things really, which is planning and our role in that, and also the CSO point that Robin mentions. So with regards to planning, just some background if you didn't know before, I know some of you do know this, but obviously Anglian Water do play a role in planning, although we're not statutory consultees in planning applications. It's quite a surprising fact that a lot of our stakeholders here, when we divulge that to them, It's an oddity in the law that we have this thing called a right to connect in the UK, or in England certainly. So developers have a automatic right to connect to our infrastructure. That doesn't mean to say we don't get involved in planning. We very much do, and our pre-development team who look at planning applications across Anglian Waters region seek out those planning applications and work with local planning authorities and developers to make sure that any sort of infrastructure that's proposed is going to be sustainable and not add any issues to environment, be it pollution or water quality or flooding or even water supply, obviously on the clean water side. So with that in mind, one of the first questions that was put to us was about whether the systems that we have in Anglian Waters region are combined and foul or surface water. And the true answer is it's a real mix. Most of our coastal towns, certainly North Norfolk, what we would class as combined systems historically. The sort of big towns of Sheringham, Cromer, the sort of big coastal villages and towns have historically had combined systems, which means they collect surface water and foul flows. That harks back to the days of when more effluent was discharged into the sea. So the proximity of that meant that those systems were used. That's not the way things are done now, certainly. So as you go more inland, you get much more separate systems in villages and towns across Norfolk, where you have a separate surface water system and a separate foul system. Historically, Anglian Water are responsible for foul systems and some combines and surface water systems, but the majority of surface water flows are managed by the local flood authority, invariably it's a county council. So in essence, the question is it depends where you are really, what system you get. But certainly going forward, any new systems, so new developments will have separate systems wherever possible. The next question we got was about capacity and whether we get involved in that planning decision. And as I said before, we're not statutory consultees, but we do seek out and ask for planning authorities to add conditions to planning applications where we think, through modelling and working with developers and doing some analysis of those connection points, there may be a detriment to that connection, be it flooding or pollution. It's then up to the local planning authority to take that condition on and enforce it or not. But we're very much an open book and a transparent organisation that want to work with developers and local planning authorities to make sure that the development is sustainable and is going to enhance and not add any detriment to the environment, because we're conscious of the anxiety that villages and locals feel when new housing streams come on, particularly if there's been some historic issues around flooding or pollution before. They see, obviously quite naturally, they see that as a threat and a worry. What we will say is that, again, this is in planning law, that developers cannot be charged for fixing any existing issues, if you like. So if there are some problems, not caused by Anglian Water necessarily, but or by other means, that there's been historical issues of flooding, the developer cannot be forced to pay for that enhancement or that better. It's called betterment. But again, we do work with developers to make sure that what they do put in doesn't make things worse or add to problems. And obviously those problems and historical ones, we've got several of across the region, are being dealt with separately with us and lots of other agencies. You'll be well aware, I'm sure, of the Norfolk Strategic Flood Alliance that Lord Dannett does last year. I think if you're involved in that, you'll see the complexities involved in managing surface water and flooding in our communities. And he's done a sterling job actually pulling lots of stakeholders together to push that forward. And there's some real positive action coming out of that. And we're very much part of that process with all the other, I think, 36 agencies that are involved in flooding management in Norfolk. I suppose the next thing was about the frequency of rainfall events. And obviously with climate change, a key part of everyone's lives these days, and it does affect Anglian Water a lot. I think we probably are the most affected water company in the UK with regards to climate change and the impacts that has on our assets and our ability to manage our systems, not just in terms of sort of flash floods and flooding, but also the water scarcity point of less rainfall in the summer. And we've got lots of investment coming on stream to mitigate both of those challenges going forward. And we can probably we'll send you lots of information after the meeting to explain a bit more about that. So the Water Industry Act states that we have to give an automatic right to connect to these developers. But we do want to work with them and get the best solutions possible to mitigating the issues that might come about from the adding more flows to our network. I suppose just as a bit of background as well, foul flows in terms of what that contributes to existing water networks through sewers and water recycling centres where we treat them is entirely manageable in the existing assets most of the time. And what we do, we look forwards to that growth and work out whether the addition of those foul flows, and that's all we can comment on in planning, as with the statutory, we look after foul flows as part of that planning process. If they didn't, then we would forward investment to make sure, working with developer, that they will put that mitigation in. But the surface water part of new developments, which is where people do see, you know, the hard standing areas being put up, roof water, that sort of thing, should be dealt with, as I said, by the lead local flow authority, which in this case is Norfolk County Council. But again, we're encouraging them to go for low carbon solutions, looking at sustainable drainage solutions, swales and natural drainage and natural solutions to those managing those surface water issues. What we don't want to see is that surface water getting into that foul system, because obviously that water then gets to our treatment centres or through our sewers and can overwhelm some of our existing assets, because that water shouldn't be there in the first place. We don't want to be adding any more to it. But as I say, unfortunately, the law states that automatic right to connect is still there, and if planning authority deems that all other options are not viable, then that is the last resort. So unfortunately, there are some occasions where some surface water connections are put into our system, and then we would have to really work really closely with the developer to make sure that that isn't going to add any additional flooding or problems down the line. So it's quite a complicated matter, but again, we can send you lots of information on that in detail afterwards. I think that all on planning. Robin, have you got anything else? Unless they've got, I mean, I don't know, Chairman, have you got any questions while we're speaking, or do you want them at the end, or so people to engage now, or do you want us to go through all the questions?
Well, I think probably it's useful just to describe where we are in terms of where the focus should be, because I think it's right that we respond to the full council resolution that was reached, and that actually asked this committee to review the periodic sewage discharge events and to report progress on any investments that have been made as well. So I think what I'd like to ensure is that we focus on those issues first and foremost. So one of the things that's uppermost in my mind is communication, actually, because every time you have one of those events, it either discharges into a river or it discharges into a coastal area. And from our point of view, and I'm looking at environmental health here now, there will be implications with regard to health, public health, environmental health. And so I'm not sure what kind of relationship you would normally have with our environmental health department and team, so that information is passed in such a way that if, for example, you have a major discharge event at Sheringham or Cromer, then that information is actually passed out to the public in a way that the public can respond to that, i.e. stay out of the water, or that particular, you know, they've got forewarning of that. Similarly, if it happens, you know, on the River Ant at Wayford, for example, then people who might consider swimming in that part of the river system would at least have notice of that. And in that way, we would perhaps be able to keep the public better informed and in some ways better protected. So I think we understand that the events are happening. We're not comfortable with those, and I think nobody's comfortable with those. But what we would like to know is, how can we make perhaps that situation better from the public point of view?
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. I shall attempt to cover that off effectively. I mean, just to kind of cut to the specific point around kind of providing information to users of beaches or users of rivers. So, you know, how do we at the moment, the situation we're in is we kind of publish our EDM, event duration monitor data, on our website. It gets passed through to the Rivers Trust. It gets shared with Surfers Against Sewage and to our beach alert system. but I don't think that's agile enough, and that's not giving kind of in real-time information. And the Environment Act now requires us to work towards the provision of near real-time information for users of the environment, be that beaches or rivers. So that's kind of set now through the Environment Bill. So that's what we're working towards. So for beaches, we have our beach alert system. So we have the system where if we have a storm event, we have a discharge of dilute but still not fully treated effluent. Then there should be a beach alert system which should alert users so that they can make decisions as to whether they go in the water or not. What we want to do is there's a huge appetite now for kind of inland river swimming and much more connection to the river. So what we want to do is kind of replicate that system for rivers as well. The very first stage of that will be by the end of this year. We hope to have on our website, we hope to have a kind of a postcode checker so that people can go onto the website, put in their postcode and get information around kind of what's happened in their local environment. And we're working with the Rivers Trust at the moment, National Rivers Trust, but also Norfolk Rivers Trust, about how we kind of use their website or our website to make sure that's available. It'll be available on both, but we want to make sure, often people trust a third party rather than the water company that's had the issue kind of thing. So again, we're kind of trying to cover all bases. So beaches now should be covered through the beach alert system. That's what we want to replicate for rivers, and we want to make sure our information is available on our website so that people can then, and it's not just data, it's data which is turned into information which helps people make a decision as to how they want to interact with the river or the particular stretch of water. So that's the end game, and this is now mandated in legislation through the Environment Bill. The Environment Act has now puts a duty on us to make this data available. It doesn't say by when yet, so we're as soon as practicable, we'll kind of get on with that. So that's the data and the information piece. I think if I just step back just to just tackle CSOs, combined storm overflows in general, and what our overall strategy is as an organisation, what our approach is to tackling CSOs, and then come down into kind of what specifically we're doing in this district, if I may. As we're aware, CSOs were designed, combined storm overflows were designed, decades ago. They were kind of installed decades ago on these combined systems. And they were designed, of course, as we all know, to prevent sewer flooding. One of the most horrendous things we can do to any customer is have sewage kind of backing up in the downstairs toilet, in the shower tray, or whatever. That is completely unacceptable. So our predecessors decided that the best way to deal with that would be to put pressure release valves in the sewerage system, so that in times of high load, high hydraulic capacity, or a blockage, instead of sewage backing up into people's homes and businesses, it would discharge to the environment. The environmental theory was, which is very questionable now, the environmental theory was that this is a high rainfall event. What's in the pipes will be very, very dilute. And also the receiving part of the environment, the river, will be in full flow. And again, in theory, will be very dilute. Now, that is not, that's the theory behind them. What we realize now is that's not how we should be dealing with kind of surface water flooding or sewer flooding in 2022. So, we have an absolute commitment to work to remove, ensure we're not causing any harm or any kind of public nuisance from these assets. So any environmental harm from any of our assets, our water recycling centre or our sewer network, is completely unacceptable. So to be very, very clear on this, and as I say, CSOs are not a 21st century solution to dealing with sewer flooding. There are much better things we can be doing. So our strategy, first of all, is to get monitors on every CSO. So we're installing event duration monitors. And we've installed event duration monitors on, of the 53 overflows that we have in this district, we now have 71% coverage of EDM. So we have 71% coverage, and we will be at 100% next year. So we will completed our program. We were due to have installed, get to 100% by March 2025, but we're bringing that program forward to the end of 2023. We'll have 100% coverage. That will give us the information as to which assets are spilling and what the reasons are, and therefore what we can do about it, because this is a risk assessment process. One thing we are very clear on is that a spill does not automatically equate to environmental damage or environmental harm. And we're doing a lot of work at the moment to understand specifically, it's called the Storm Overflow Assessment Framework, the environmental harm, just to and some of the early things are saying there isn't actually a lot of environmental damage, but it is still unacceptable, and the aesthetics and the potential public health implications are not acceptable. So I'm not making an excuse, I'm just saying, that's the thing. And indeed, within the region, one of the measures of kind of the state of the environment is good ecological status, which is a Water Framework Directive terminology. And when we look across the region at the reasons that rivers and water bodies are not achieving good ecological status, combined sewer overflows in this region only actually account for about 1% of the kind of the environmental harm. But this is not an argument where I want to get into statistics or try and belittle the problem in any way, shape or form, because as I say, I'll keep coming back to it. It is not an acceptable way to deal with sewage in this sewage flooding in this day and age. So our process is a risk assessment process. So looking across all with our ever increasing event duration monitor data, this enables us to understand where we have high spilling activities. And the first thing it enables us to do is to say, well, actually, where we've got either monitor problems or we've got the monitor in the wrong place, or we've got some problems. So, for example, at Cromer, we have an eye-watering 1,219 hours of spills at Cromer on 154 occasions. That's a false meter. That's a false reading on the meter. The meter was not giving us the right answer. That is a complete foot shoot on behalf of Anglian Water. That is ridiculous for us to be publishing that data. And what my role is and Grant's role is to get ahead of that data, to have that data so that we can then assure you that that did not happen. We did not spill at Cromer on 154 occasions. So try to be very open and transparent with you, which I hope is appreciated. That's a complete foot shoot on Anglian Water's part, and we've got to eradicate that by having these EDMs, understanding where we're having high spill frequencies enables us to take action. So once we've eliminated any daft data, or we've got some occasions, there's a works in Cambridge where actually it's the river surcharge. I think we've got another issue somewhere around here where there's kind of tidal surcharge back up the pipe, which then triggers the alarm. Again, we need to move, we need to think very carefully through this. But this is new information we're getting. This is new progress we're getting as we ever march forward with the installation of the event duration monitors. What I should then say is the action we've taken already is we've already removed 300 of our highest risk CSOs from our network. So we've already done that. And over the course of this 5-year period, 2020-2025, we're investing £200 million specifically on this issue. A large part of that is around installation of the event duration monitors that I've talked about, and then taking action to remove the highest spilling assets. But a large part of that investment is actually around investment in additional capacity on our network. When we look at kind of why do CSOs operate? They operate for largely two main reasons. The first one is when we have a blockage in the sewer network. So we have blockages, and again, very familiar to this committee and all of us is a lot of blockages are caused by wet wipes and the sewers being used as a bin, the wrong stuff is being put down. So, we welcome the opportunity to work with local authorities around, getting those messages out that the sewers are not bins. When we talk to our kind of, we have people, lifting up manholes, pouring bricks, bicycles, all sorts of stuff. Our fine ladies and gentlemen who run our networks have some amazing stories of the stuff they put out of sewers. So that's just simply not acceptable, and that's quite tricky for us to control. But again, we can control it through working in partnership with organisations, local authorities, to get those messages out that sewers are not bins. We welcome the enormous fury around plastic containing wet wipes. Fleur Anderson, the MP for Putney, has a private member's bill going through at the moment to ban plastic wet wipes. They're an absolute scourge. One of the things I would like to do for the committee is invite you, if you'd accept my invitation, to come and visit one of our water recycling centres in this region. We're doing this with other similar committees. Just come and see, and we'll show you what the stuff we drag off our screens at the very front end of the process kind of thing. It's very, very, very visual reminder. So we'll work with you, Mr. Chairman, to arrange a visit if that would be acceptable. The other reason, of course, then that CSOs operate is because of hydraulic. There's too much water in the system. Is the issue of surface water kind of ingress into the system, and surface water shouldn't be getting into the valve system. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And the answer at the moment, so the work we're doing at the moment, is to install additional capacity. So we are building additional storm tanks so that when storms happen, we can collect that water and we can store it and then put it through the full treatment process before it's discharged. Now, to be slightly controversial, that is not the answer. Anglian Water, building ever more storm tanks is not the answer. Because what we are doing then, we're pouring an awful lot of concrete, we're burning up an awful lot of carbon, but also we are storing the problem up right next to the riverbank or next to the beach. So basically we're gathering all of this surface water intake, all the water in from the catchment, plonk it in a lovely big tank right next to the river, the chalk stream or the beach, and then we're one false move away from disaster kind of thing. So the answer, of course, has to be an upstream solution. We have to work back upstream. We have to understand how and where surface water is getting into our system, and we have to work particularly with developers. Grants talked around the automatic right to connect, which again, Schedule 3 of the Flood and Water Management Act, again, we are pushing for an amendment to that, which will remove the automatic right to connect and will also legislate for mandatory SUDs, so sustainable urban drainage schemes within all new development. So this is a really important legislation that we are pushing through to ensure is enacted through this process. So again, we are really keen to work in partnership and this is communities large and small and stakeholders large and small, to understand how we can manage surface water upstream. So how can we work to, particularly for new developments are almost the easier bit because we've got a few more powers and some more controls in our hands to understand what we can do around, particularly around SUDs and other ways of kind of keeping the surface water back. Of course, we have a huge kind of legacy problem as well. So one of the things we are doing is in a couple of trial places, we're trying to get an idea of the scale of the existing issue. You know, how many downpipes, how many downpipes or extensions or whatever are kind of plumbed into our system wrongly. And just some statistics, some work we did in the town of March in Cambridge, not far from where I've come from this morning, where of around 10,000 properties in the town of March, just over 2,000 of those properties or buildings had their rainwater directly connected to the foul system. So 20% were directly connected. 425 highway gullies drained rainwater off the roads directly into wastewater sewer pipes, again contributing to the problem. We had 24 hectares of impermeable area. So this is hard surfaces such as roads, car parks and roofs, and astroturf lawns. Who has an astroturf lawn? Good Lord, you know, again, this passion for, you know, astroturf lawns, sorry, astroturf, I won't look in that direction. Apologies for embarrassing you, but yeah, astroturf lawns, hard driveways, all of this, you know, exacerbates the problem. Water lands and just has to run off, and often it finds its way into these highway gullies and away. So 10 hectares of highway, 14 acres of roof area, discharging directly into the system. Now that is something where we can then work in partnership. And I note the question around, you know, what information do we give around, you know, free water butts for customers? Well, that's something we're investigating. You know, that would be lovely for every new house to be able with a water butt, every home to have a water butt. You know, there's a really simple steps that people can take. But importantly, there are things that we can do at the planning stage. There are things that we can do at the building inspection stage with an extension. You know, I have an extension. We've extended our home. The builder, I'm not a plumber, you know, the builder put in some pipes. The building inspector came along, inspected them, signed a certificate, and then it was all concreted over. I do not know where the pipes from my extension went into in my home. So, and I work for Anglian Water. I've worked for Anglian Water for 25 years. You would think I'd be relatively informed on this. So what hope does the general public have? So, you know, there's an awful lot of kind of conversations that we can have around that, around, you know, strengthening building inspectors, making sure that builders are building, that people are very, very clear that we need to keep surface water out. So, as I say, we are installing more, spending about £200 million in this 5-year period. We're installing more monitors to give us more information around kind of actual events, enabling us to then target high spillers. The number, we've removed 300 already, but again, with removing 300, it isn't just a case of filling them in, concreting them over. You know, we need to work with the catchment, because what we can't then do is have sewers, you know, sewer flooding in houses upstream. We are then, in the short term, really increasing the capacity of our system through the provision of additional storm tanks. But moving forward, we would very much welcome the opportunity to work in partnership with communities large and small and with key stakeholders to understand how we can keep surface water out of our system. That's probably all I wanted to say by way of introduction. That's a bit of not introduction, no, that's part of my piece. That's me just getting started, so no. And I'd really welcome the opportunity to kind of get into discussion and take any questions you have. Again, very grateful for the questions you sent us in advance, and we will send you a formal response. We got a couple of questions last week around our 2021 data, which is, believe it or not, is still being finalised and agreed with the Environment Agency. So the moment we have our 2021 data, we will send that to you as well. But as I say, the other thing we're trying to do is make sure that we are very open and transparent about our data, but also the work we do. And as I say, I'd like to welcome you to visit one of our assets, one of our local water recycling centres, as soon as we can arrange it, just to come and see what we do. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I just press you on one point? And I think this has particular relevance for the here and now, because when you were describing how you communicate to the public the discharges that we are experiencing on the coast and the rivers, I may have misheard you, but it seems to me that the public has to go to a website in order to interrogate whether there is a problem when they want to go or when they're thinking of going swimming. So I'm just looking at this from a resident's and a tourist's point of view. Don't you have a means by which that is actually made and put in the public domain so that it is advertised, if you like? I don't like that word because you don't want to advertise that sort of thing, but it is a warning system that would enable those members of the public that wouldn't think about going onto the National Rivers Trust to look for that information, but it is there. If they're in Munsley or wherever it happens to be, one of the things that would be evident to them making their way to go in to have that swim, the north end of the beach or the south end of the beach is not the place to go. That's the sort of thing that I think our residents would really want to know, and certainly our tourists and our tourist providers, experienced providers would want to know. And I'm wondering, how do you access that? How does the public? How can you help the public to access that information?
Yeah, forgive me, I didn't describe the system particularly well. So we use it's our beach aware system. We send out automated alerts. So when a CSO operates, in the vicinity of a beach, we send an automated alert to the local authority, to the EA, and also to Surfers Against Sewage. So we've got a relationship with Surfers Against Sewage that we provide that information automatically. As soon as something happens, it's an automatic notification. And what Surfers Against Sewage do is they have a Safer Seas and Rivers app, which the public can sign up to, which actually gives them then the real-time information and alerts them. So we notify the EA, we will notify you as well, kind of in real time. So, but I don't know the actual mechanics of kind of how that goes through. But in terms of the public accessibility, it's the Safer Seas and Rivers app, which is probably something we can work together to promote and make sure that people are very aware, beach users and tourists are aware of the app and they have it downloaded, and then they can make those decisions. But you're right, customers or members of the public or tourism shouldn't have to go onto a water company website and postcode search. So, this is the app. I think this is the app that Surfers Against Sewage use. It's the Safer Seas and Rivers app, which can be downloaded. And I think probably what we can do is some joint communications from us, but also locally around making sure people got that downloaded before they go onto the beach.
Okay, that's helpful. But I think you said that local authorities are on your list of notifications. Is that correct?
It is, yeah, absolutely. But
so Norfolk would be one of them?
Yes, but it'll be the environmental health team. But is that true, Grant? Sorry.
So, yeah, I think it goes to your environmental health officers, because when we had some incidents in the summer, they were the people that got notified. It wasn't Anglian Water, but there was a spill at Sheringham, I think, last year. It was all over the media, and there was some runoff from the road, and I think they got alerted, and we got alerted at the same time. So there is a link that goes through to somebody in the councils.
I think I'd like to know more about that, actually, to know whether that's working, and because that's quite new to me, and there may be those in the room that have better information. Mr. Hems, you're holding the microphone. Do tell. I think you have to switch it on. Is it switched on? Speak a little louder.
And we'll do the same as well. We'll work out, but just for the avoidance of doubt, I mean, no way of saying, well, we told your EHOs, therefore they should have told the public. I'm not saying that at all. That's not how it should work. You know, we are letting our environmental health colleagues know because of environmental health, and because if there is an outbreak of disease associated with it, we need to make sure environmental health officers have got all the information that they need. So, we wouldn't, as my colleague says, we shouldn't, this is around this is a bit of retrospective conversation about what's gone on in the area, and as how the general environmental health conversation, rather than okay, we told the EHO's got to ring around a load of people and put a flag up or something. That's where an app is ideal for this sort of thing. So, but what I'd like to do, Mr. Chairman, is kind of just respond formally on that, just so we can exactly clarify the lines of communication when something happens into the local authority and into other stakeholders. If I can come back to you on that, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, it seems to me that there's potentially an early win here, in that if we can establish the way information should flow and whether it does flow and how it gets distributed, and then keep our public and keep our tourists informed, absolutely, we can do something for them this coming season. Just how early the win can be. Yeah. So I think to get that clarified would be a significant step forward. Yeah,
obviously just on that as well, obviously you've got a blue flag scheme, so all the beaches in North Norfolk have got blue flags, so obviously that's an external EA monitoring, so that gives assurance to the bathers that through the season that water is safe to swim in. Obviously, where there are local incidents, then we'll look into that, Mr. Chairman, and get some details about one-off incidents that happen throughout summer storms or whatever. But yeah, safe to say that Norfolk is a great place to bathe. And also, what we'll bring up on is obviously this is all about the beach alert system. I might hand over to Rob in a minute to talk about what we're doing about rivers in that stage, because as you mentioned about how do people know whether it's safe or not to swim in rivers. Now, there aren't many, probably only one or two designated bathing quality river structures in the UK. I think Yorkshire and Thames have got Oxfordshire. So that's something we're looking into. So maybe if you want to talk about that as well, I mean, if people are interested, we can send you information. Or Robin, do you want to quickly?
So just very briefly on inland bathing waters, which is something very much in the press at the moment, and something we actively want to encourage. We're very happy to work to enable that. You may have seen in the middle of March, we launched a campaign called Get River Positive with our colleagues at Severn Trent Water. So we partnered with Severn Trent. One of our pledges is to, we've made kind of 5 pledges around kind of environmental harm, reducing CSOs, but we have made a specific pledge around bathing waters. And we've made a pledge that by 2030, everyone will be no more than an hour away from a designated bathing water, be that the coast or inland. Now, of course, we already have a designated inland beach at our Rutland Water Reservoir, which we're very proud of, which is a big tourist attraction. But we want to make sure that we can provide some more inland bathing waters. We are looking at the moment. We've identified 20 sites across our entire region, from kind of Grimsby down to Tilbury, which have the potential to become inland bathing water sites. And what we're doing now, again, is a risk assessment process, kind of going through. And one of the things that's very key is their local desire, local engagement. One of the areas where we were getting quite a long way forward was the River Cam in Cambridge. In Newnham, but local residents, and we were working with the Cam Valley Forum, who are the local river group. But again, there was strong objection from residents at that time because of noise, litter, etc. There was some concern. So just because we can doesn't mean, it can be enabled, doesn't mean to say that it will go through for other reasons. The thing that we need to do, obviously we need to look at CSOs, but we also need to look at the discharges, or the treated effluent, quality of the treated effluent leaving our water recycling centres. And what we would need to do very definitely is install disinfection. So we'd actually put in the same way that we have, all of the coastal sites have UV, ultraviolet disinfection. We would have to look at a system like that for inland bathing waters as well. Really interestingly, we've just had a great success with a chemical called performic acid at Southwold, and we've just this year, Southwold, the 2 beaches at Southwold have regained their blue flag. They are now, one is excellent and one is good status just down the coast at Southwold through the use of this chemical. It's an alternative disinfectant. It's the disinfectant that's going to be used for the River Seine next year for the Paris Olympics. So it's something that is credible. And this offers us a much lower carbon footprint, a much more environmentally friendly opportunity to kind of disinfect water. So again, this is something we want to pilot and trial. The one thing I don't do today, Mr. Chairman, is have a list of the 20 sites, which is an error on my part. So whether there are any in this district, but again, I'll confirm that back to you, whether there are any areas, any stretches in the river that we're looking at in this district. I'll come back to you on that. Thank you.
I think we'll have the acoustic.
Silly. Yeah. Just respond to your point around kind of regular updates. One of the things I haven't read it out today, but we've listed all of the investment we're making in the district in terms of from storm tank investment, EDM installation. So when we kind of formally respond to the questions, we'll have that, and perhaps we can is it quarterly, 6 monthly? Is it an annual update on specifically on those schemes? But importantly as well, we are just about over the next 12 months, we'll also be doing our planning, developing our next investment program from 2025 to 2030. So again, we will want to work in liaison with you about the next kind of tranche of investment. So again, so really we've got a kind of a golden moment, a golden window to work with you on that and share those plans with you.
Okay, just picking up on one of your suggestions of the first one, certainly is one that I would suggest might well be relevant to this committee. We at the moment have a snapshot of what's happening. What we'd like is continuing information so that we can see a trend here.
Yeah.
So what we will, I think, be looking for is a flow of information that helps us to identify where the problems are and whether they're getting worse or better, or whether there are any other influences that can be brought to bear that would improve the situation. So information is key here. And we've only got a snapshot, and we need to build that database. So I think that's a very worthy suggestion. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to feature a couple of things on the.
This will be quickly, will it?
It will be. Private store overflows. I had a couple of incidents in the same village. Last year, September, October. I must say we dealt with it pretty efficiently in the end. Our engineers came out, they cleared the system, they even serviced the sewage plant in the village. What I found, however, was a communication problem. That there wasn't sort of a dedicated helpline for overflows. I had to go through your very protective service system. Work my way up the levels through various phone calls until I got to the area manager, who then gave me a mobile number, which I think he was quite protective of. Got that impression. But the service was good. The thing that came out of it was that there wasn't wasn't much cooperation between the county council over their duty to clear the drains under their assets in the highways in situations like that, which was a concern to the manager. The other thing as well is that I had a discussion about the legal connections. We talked about permitted connections that developers are allowed to make. Would it not help if the unauthorised connection of surface water connection points into your sewers was made a criminal offence?
I'll address that point first. I think it would help, but I don't know how we'd have the powers. There's nothing kind of coming.
Well, no, we are very much lobbying government. I think some of your colleagues in this very room have written on our behalf to ministers about that very issue. The Planning Act is what it is. It is under review, and part of our process to lobby government is to change that automatic right connect and make it an illegal offence to connect it into our system. So that I'll say so. Very difficult to administer and check. You can appreciate, obviously, either through unscrupulous builders connecting or just complete unknown. They didn't know about it. And it's all back down to resources and planning control and building officers to inspect those connections. Just back on your point about local liaison, I think that's something we can look at, and I've certainly, as a few of your colleagues I've had regular conversations with, that's something we can look into. One thing I will mitigate there is that we need to make sure that all those issues are coming to our systems and into our corporate databases properly. And so that is invariably through our customer contact centre. So it's properly recorded as an incident and an action that otherwise, if you ring in the local manager, he or she may help you, but is that recorded efficiently and properly? But certainly, yeah, the more engagement we do with communities, as Robin said, the better. And again, it's nice to see a few familiar faces where we've done that very thing. And me and the rest of the people in my team are getting out more and more to talk to communities and help where we can. So we want to keep that dialogue going. But on the legal point, we're definitely lobbying hard to get that law changed.
And are you engaging proactively to help us resolve the neutrality problem that is bedeviling I sit on the development committee, as many of my colleagues do.
Yeah.
It's a serious concept.
Absolutely.
I used to have to play. I'm coordinating with the board.
We are. So just step out, just to absolutely just reiterate something Grant said. As councillors, if you're dealing with a problem, you should not have to ring Anglian Water's call centre. Grant is your contact, your primary contact. So you should not. So, but Grant makes a very, very valid point. We need to make sure that it is logged on a system. So if there's a problem in an area, make sure the parish council, the residents have rung the contact centre. But you as councillors dealing with it, seeking answers. Grant is and Grant has a colleague, and and me, whoever, I'm very happy for you to have my contact details as well. I want to be very open and transparent to make sure that you don't have to press 3 and hold on, because that's also clogging up our contact centre time for dealing. We can do that. So neutrality, absolutely, yeah. This was a surprise to us, I guess, as much as it was to you. The letter landed from Natural England and asked us what we're doing about it. So we are absolutely seizing the metal with this. We are connected. So the very first thing we're doing is we're working through Trevor Wiggett on behalf of who's coordinating on behalf of all of the districts into county level around providing data on our water recycling centres. So again, what are the current phosphate loadings? An awful lot of our treatment or water recycling centres, particularly in the Wensum catchment, are actually already over treating. They are achieving their phosphate standard. It's phosphate for Wensum, it's phosphate and nitrogen for the Broads, of course. So we're looking at our data, we're sharing our data with local authorities. What we're also now doing is working with Norfolk Rivers Trust, and Norfolk Rivers Trust have just been commissioned by the county to do a scoping study to look at the opportunity for treatment wetlands on the back end of every single water recycling centre along the Wensum and within the Broads catchment. So again, how can we use nature-based solutions? You'll be aware of our Inglesthorpe, our treatment wetland Inglesthorpe, which is going to prove that these do provide opportunities. So, and the really clever thing we want to do is to make sure that then provides opportunities for biodiversity net gain, which is something developers have to achieve. It also provides opportunity for carbon sequestration, for offsetting. And as Anglian Water, we are going to have to offset a small amount of an amount of carbon as we route through to net zero. So again, how do we invest in those nature-based solutions for carbon sequestration? But also importantly, it's got to link into local nature recovery strategies and connect all the nature restoration and things. So we're providing data. We are working with Norfolk Rivers Trust on the feasibility of wetlands on the back end of our sewage works. We've had a letter from Minister Powell last week, Rebecca Powell, signed by the Chief Executive of the Environment Agency and Ofwat and the Minister, asking us for our thoughts on how developers could contribute. Essentially, the traditional way is that we want to build something on the back end of our water recycling centre. We have to put it into our planning process. 5 years later, it pops out the other end, kind of thing. How do we speed that up? And actually, how do we, how can developers or other organisations contribute to the cost of an asset, an Anglian Water asset, an operation of it? So, and already we've got, I'm aware of 2 developers on the Wensum. In my conversation with the Chief Executive of Norfolk Rivers Trust, rings me most days on this. I'm going to ring him on the way back. And we've got 2 developers. There's another landowner on the Wensum who's got 6 miles of the Wensum runs through his land. He's really interested in investing in this as well. So there's a real desire for landowners to help. There's a real opportunity for developers to contribute, and there's certainly a willingness for us to lead where we can. And I would love.
I'm mindful of the clock, and I've got 2 further questions, and so I would ask for brevity, please. Councillor Lloyd next.
Thanks for coming along today.
Yeah.
But something that occurs in my group, I'm sure it's difficult. Water's drains, serviceable drains. It's about ownership, and we struggle. At the same time, I think water is saying that it's okay into that system. This stuff plus on a regular basis. So it's something to bring to your attention, really. But we've tried to engage with you absolutely nowhere. We've managed to get the council project where it extends to there. It seems to me that we do have a responsibility can't just end the pipeline. Got a piece of land that becomes overgrown, full of rubbish. You maintain that piece of land. I just want to bring that to your attention. I realise that I'm hoping we're going to come back again.
We will, absolutely, if we're invited, if we haven't taken up too much time.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll come back to this.
Yeah. And I think that's important, just to be really clear. You know, Grant, you have a kind of a contact here, a direct contact into Anglia Water for this sort of issue. What I never want to hear is that you're struggling to get hold of us, or you're, you know, in this position, you shouldn't be struggling to get hold of us, or battling to try and get through to speak to somebody who can help you.
It's the lack of responsibility.
Right. Okay. Okay.
The water that's created.
Well, could,
Yeah.
okay. So could we pick that up with you offline? Could we have an exchange between Grant and yourself?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rainfall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the presentations. I agree with Mr. Chair that it really helpful to have data going forward.
Sure.
So to monitor sewage discharges and CSOs, so we can see the trends.
Sure.
So my question is, are things as regards discharges and CSOs getting better or worse historically? And if they are getting better, I'm confident that they will keep getting better.
So if we look back at our data, there's kind of two key metrics that we look at are the number of times a CSO operates, so how many spills we have, and the total duration of the spillage, and both of those measures are improving. So I think it's 2017, 2018 was the first day we started installing these EDMs, and our average spill frequency for our CSOs was around 38 times a year. So CSOs operated 38 times a year. Now, back in the old design guidance, when I've done my kind of my bit of history, but you know, CSOs were designed to operate on around about 40 times a year. So that was kind of the maths that went into the design of them. So that's where we were a couple of years ago. Last year we'd reduced to 25 spills, and the total number of hours had reduced. It's 200 and something hours. It was a marginal increase, but it was an improvement. So, but I think one of the things, as I mentioned before, that would have included this 1,219 hours at Chroma, which just didn't happen. So again, better data quality, better coverage of EDMs, better analysis, better risk assessment will get us a long way through, but also having that information and using it to target the high spillers and take action gives me a lot of confidence that this situation will continue to improve.
So that's obviously in your thought. So is your intention that we'll get to zero?
That's a tricky one. So we are. I've responded this week to the government's consultation on storm overflows. You may well have seen it, and that doesn't mandate a target of zero because again, a spill doesn't equate to environmental damage, environmental harm. So you know, just because a spill's happened does not mean to say the environment has suffered as a result of that. So this is where we have to understand. You know, we could dig up every road, dig up every combined sewer system, replumb the whole network, and probably the outcomes for the environment would be rather marginal. There are other things we've got to do as we prioritise our investment process, being very, very candid and direct with you. But what we do welcome is the targets will come. We'll look at, you know, we'll again focus our risk assessments around discharges, you know, reducing discharges around high priority sites. Introduces a public health measure, particularly around bathing water, and it also introduces a kind of a link to rainfall. So, you know, almost eliminating these things should not be operating in dry weather. You know, that shouldn't be happening. So again, some targets around that, which we welcome. But the government have, yeah, the consultation on the government storm overload discharge reduction plan is still live. If you wish to respond to it. Yeah, absolutely. Well, the targets we've set ourselves internally are more ambitious than the targets DEFRA have set us. So.
Right, okay, well, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to bring our discussions to a close. I do really need to do that because we are an hour round, and is it going to be short? Well, let's have it then.
I think it's more the answer we need to. I'll be quick. So the very short answer is we've got a written answer to that exact question because you submitted it. So perhaps we'll cover that when we write to you. if that's
Absolutely.
okay.
That's what I was hoping we would get, actually. Splendid. Thank you very much indeed. Excellent. I'm going to draw this then to a close, and I think if I picked it up rightly, there are issues that need to be pursued with regard to communications, and that's particularly in relation to this authority and indeed the wider public with regard to those events that we've been discussing, how widely shared and how can they better be communicated to our residents and our tourist communities. There's certainly a need to share data. We would like to be very much on the ball with regard to, I don't know the frequency of it, but monthly comes to mind, or quarterly at the very least, for us to be able to have the data on what's happening with regard to discharges. And the other theme that comes out of this is a need to work with partners in greater detail, because some of the solutions that you're looking for are actually quite likely to be deliverable by town and parish councils as well, because the question of what we do with surface water, I'm a little surprised in a way that you don't know already who dumps their surface water into your system, because you charge them for it. You bill them for it, and unless you, I would suggest that that's one easy way. There may be some instances where people are paying for it or not paying for it when they should be the other way around. But I would suggest that a really good start, and what would give you a ballpark figure of how big the problem is, because people pay you for it, and in some ways, from the public point of view, that's something that you've obviously known about for a long time, because you've been billing people for a long time. And the other surprise, I suppose, that I have is that you mentioned about nutrient neutrality, and you were surprised at that. I assume that you probably mean the time scale that Natural England have imposed it, because nutrient neutrality and nutrient loading of rivers and broads has been around for a long time. And I think the thing that has probably caught us by surprise is the firm line that the government has taken. And to be honest, I think there are probably many in this room who would say that actually is the right thing to do, because if we are serious about climate change and ecosystem and all the other things that go along with that, then we probably do have to draw a line somewhere. It's how we actually appropriately and be proportionate about the imposition of that, and where we can allow development to continue. So a risk assessed basis, I think, is probably the way forward on that. But thank you very much indeed for that. So with those sort of three themes, communications, data, and closer working with partners, is that something that you would identify with as something that we would draw out of this as something worthy of making recommendations on? And we're looking for, obviously, future working with you. We're not asking you to come along to, regular meetings of this kind with a particular frequency in mind, but we would certainly want to see you back so that we can take stock of the situation at some point in the future. Let's go with those three themes, if you like: communication, data, and partnership working. Is that something that I'm getting nods across the chamber? So thank you very much indeed. We're required, I think, to receive and note the briefing, and you delivered that, and thank you very much. We look forward to the written replies, and that will probably take us a little bit further forward in terms of consolidating our understanding of what you said today. So thank you very much indeed for coming along today. And we've all, I think, learned quite a bit, and hopefully you've got a bit to take away with you as well. Okay, thank you very much indeed. On behalf of the committee, thank you indeed. Right, do you require anything further in terms of a vote or no? Okay, right. So moving on then to item 11. 11 is the pre-scrutiny of the sorry, did we say we would take the engagement strategy before that?
That's dependent on
I think we can get you away in the timescale. Let's deal with this one first. The pre-scrutiny of the sale of Parklands mobile home site at Pudding Norton, Fakenham. So, Councillor Seaward, you can't see him. He was here. Ah, I thought. Sorry? Right, okay. In lieu of Councillor Seaward, Renata, would you like to open this matter?
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, I'll do that after the introduction. Should I do that first? Okay, right. Renata, I'll ask you to do an introduction, and I'm mindful that we've got a public speaker here. So before you move on from the introduction, I will invite the public speaking to the statement then.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? No.
I'm not sure that your mic is working.
Is it working?
Can you hear it?
Hello? Is that better?
Yeah, a little closer maybe.
Thank you, Chair. So this report comes to you regarding the disposal of the Parklands residential site in or near Fakenham. It's a 38-pitch mobile home site that the council owns and operates. Would you like me to go into more detail about the report at this stage, or would you like the residents to do their statement?
I think probably we ought to hear from the public speaker first, yes.
Thank you.
I think if you're able to speak at that volume, you'll do as well as the mic is doing at the moment.
My name is Tom Hewitt. I am the chairman of the Residents Association at Parklands Residential. I'm really just speaking on behalf of those residents. I'd like to thank you for allowing us to present our point of view regarding selling Parklands. Our preference is for the new owner to continue to run the site with as few changes to the spirit of Parklands as we possibly. Many of the residents have been here for decades. Some of them since the park was built. And cannot afford to move, like they should be forced to do so. We understand that change is building us. Distances between units being an example. We, the residents, are more than willing to cooperate with the implementation of such necessary changes. And we seek to work together with the licensing officer of the council and the owner. Parklands, as you know, is a collection of affordable homes which are in short supply across Norfolk and indeed the whole. It is a close community in which we wish to see it preserved as much as possible without disturbance. Of the bids which received, we understand that 7 have been assessed. While each has their merits, I speak on behalf of the residents, and our preference is for the bidder who has proven local interests and is a known quantity to both North Norfolk District Council and the county. We ask the council to acknowledge future security, happiness, well-being of the residents of Parklands rests with you. We
used by its employees.
Thank you, Mr. McEwen. That's
Do anybody wish to raise any questions with the board, deputy or joint chair? They're very welcome to do so. If there's a chance in public or privately to your own business, we would welcome that.
thank you, Mr. McEwen.
Thank you.
Councillor Seaward, you've arrived just in the point of time. Actually, Officer Garford had been covering your absence and has done an introduction. We have just had the public statement. Is there anything you would like to say by way of introduction? No, you'll have to speak.
Right, I can't speak. Can you hear me over there, Chris? Right. What you have in front of you is a paper that talks about the process that we follow in relation to Parklands. We cannot get into the commercial side of it in the detail because that's below the line. It's for the committee to ask questions about the robustness of that process. I am not aware, as of today, of the cabinet paper that will be coming to us, who the recommended bidder would be. And I'm hoping that won't be for a little bit. What I can assure the committee is this. Myself and cabinet colleagues have been particularly insistent with officers that the bidders that expressed an interest in the site, that a thorough due diligence process was followed. Councillor and local member rightly raised concerns about the need for that, and that's recognised by cabinet. And the reason, particularly for me, why it's recognised is that I have a long-run, complex and difficult case in Norfolk, of which I have to spend at least another hour on yesterday. I am highly familiar with the issues involved in these sites. There are reputable companies that run these sites very well and properly and provide security and peace to the residents themselves. We should never forget that these are people's homes. They have a right to security. But I'm also aware that other authorities, where there are shortcomings, council officers are aware of that. And there's a number of cases over the years which they have. So what I can do when I look at this is to hopefully provide some reassurance to the residents that spoke and apologise is that they do understand where I am.
Thank you very much, Councillor Seward. Officer Garfield, would you wish to add anything to what's in the paper? I'm mindful we've got a paper which sets it out and members will have read that. So is there anything you would like to add to that?
No, I think the report sets it out. We're happy to take questions from you.
Thank you very much. So questions, particularly regarding the process that's been followed. Councillor Holliday.
So that was a question that was raised at the interviews that we had with the bidders about the future, what their intentions and plans were. The interviews were made up of a panel including representatives from the council, the agent, specialist selling agent, and 2 residents from the Residents Association.
Okay. Councillor Blathwaite.
Yeah, I was just going for the proper person. Who actually does the judgment on fit and proper person? does it come before the fire license? As in a taxi driver or someone like that?
Yes, it is dealt through licensing. It's a relatively new requirement, but they are required to show evidence that they can be a fit person.
Councillor Brown?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I wouldn't expect disclosure of the identity of any of the successful bidders, but would it be possible for you to confirm whether any of the successful bidders are based outside Norfolk?
Yes, there are bidders based outside of Norfolk.
Just to qualify that, by successful bidder, I take it you mean shortlisted bidder?
Yes, sorry, yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
On the list of bids.
Thank you. Councillor Heinrich?
Thank you, Chairman. Clearly, any successful bidder could potentially sell the site on. What can we level of guarantees can we get of these successful for long term? That does have to be integrated from residents.
So it was a question that was raised through the interview process. All bidders during that time suggested that they were in it for the long term, but there is no guarantee to that. The protection that residents have is through the Mobile Homes Act.
Councillor Withington?
Well, the Mobile Homes Act has been amended and it now has tighter controls on owners and what they can and can't do. And one of the things is that they're not able to interfere or harass owners of the mobile homes or force them to sell. So that law has been strengthened to help.
Councillor Rest and then Councillor Cushing.
The current units that are on the site, is there a current pay limit on how long
There's not an age limit as far as I'm aware. They do need to be in reasonable condition, and as a owner of that mobile home you need to maintain it in reasonable condition, but I'm not aware that there's an age limit or restriction.
Councillor Cushing.
I just want to look through the paper. Can you explain what the time scale?
So since the bids came in October, we have been undertaking all of that due diligence, looking into financial information. We've done a lot of research into conduct because we realise that is really important going forward, that we get the right owner for the site. We've done checks and obtained feedback from local authorities regarding fit and proper persons. So we've done that, and the interview was the final stage. So we are now at the point of making that assessment.
I believe it's the intention to bring the matter to Cabinet on the 6th of June. That's why this meeting has been provided with the report in its current form around process, so that you're comfortable that there has been a robust process given to the appraisal. Obviously, as you just said, Councillor Cushing, the bids were received in October, so they've been subject to due diligence and challenge around all of the issues around fit for person, the investment plans, and the financial offers that have been received. They were subject to those interview processes during, I believe, the last 2 weeks of February. And the paper is now coming forward here today for process and then for a decision on the third bidder and to proceed. They haven't been on the 6th of June.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. Okay. Well, as I said at the opening, this is about ensuring the process that's been followed in regard to this particular matter is an appropriate one, and it covers the gambit, a whole of interests, and certainly your contribution today, Mr. McEwen, I think is placed uppermost in our minds that we would want to make sure that when that decision is made, and it's not going to be made today, it's going to be made at Cabinet, and that paper is in the course of preparation. So what that recommendation will be, I have no idea. We will find out in due course. But I think the conclusion that we're reaching today is that we, as the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, are satisfied that due process has been followed. And so far, we've not identified any particular area where we would wish more work to be done or clarification to be given. And I think that's as far as we are able to go today. So unless anybody else has any last minute questions. Yes.
I just wanted to check with the residents, thank you for your presentation, that you felt that process was good, satisfactory for your point.
I can't comment direct. Terry, obviously, my life in my absence over the winter. They undertook their own. I'm sure that each of us has a slightly different view and opinion, but that's accurate. Actually, all due diligence is subject to opinion and is subjective in itself. Objective. As I said earlier, prefer somebody who's and in the itself.
Thank you, Mr. McEwen. Yes, indeed, Mr. Amos, you may.
All I've asked is to make sure it's got as much information as
Okay, thank you, Mr. Amos. Your point, I think, is well made in that you've got officers in this room, you've got cabinet members in this room who will be part of that decision making, but the members of this committee will not be making the decision. So, and what that paper says eventually when it comes to cabinet, as I said earlier, I don't know. And all I can say is that in terms of process, it seems to me that all the bases that are possible to be covered have been covered. I think you used an interesting term in your speech, which was about being subjective and being objective, and the extent to which you can be objective. There are limits to them. And, gosh. Sorry about that, folks. Well, that clears the ears a bit, doesn't it? Right, okay, so what we're required to do as a committee today, we've got two recommendations. One is to note the robust process and extensive due diligence carried out regarding assessment of the bids received. And the second is that officers present a report to Cabinet recommending sale of the Parklands mobile home site to the highest bidder on the basis of best value in accordance with section 123 of the Local Government Act of 1972. Both of those recommendations, can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor Bathwaite and Councillor Heinrich seconding. Could I have a show of hands to vote on that, please? Thank you. That looks like unanimous to me. Thank you. Right. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for coming along today. And we will leave the matter in the hands of Cabinet in due course. Okay. Right, so turning to the next item on our agenda is item 12, which is pre-scrutiny engagement. So that's the paper at pages 27 to 44. Okay. Right. All right. Yes, it'll have to be. I take it they could hear my.
They can hear you, Chair. They can't hear anybody else.
Mr. Ems. No. Showing on.
Help, Steve, if you came to this side of the room. I think the issue is that it loses connection over that side. So the closer you are to the unit, the better chance you have.
Maybe, yes, you can come to somewhere over here. As long as you're in my eyesight, I don't mind.
I've asked for the issue to be sorted.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I'm going to be brief on the introduction. So this community engagement strategy effectively comes out of the one of the 6 priorities in the corporate plan around customer focus, where it talks about stronger community engagement. It was born, if you like, out of a dual piece of work that came alongside the quality of life strategy, which clearly needs to have a significant focus on engagement. And so what this seeks to do is to set out a high-level approach to community engagement. And really, I think the point I wish to make is that we already do an awful lot of engagement across a wide range of activities and a wide range of methods of engagement. But I think the feedback we have as an authority and internally is that that often is done differently and not consistently. And so this seeks to set out a framework by which we can do that across all authorities, and always we build it into the process so that we are able, when we are designing new services or looking at how we deliver things, we're able to have a strong level of engagement with those that we those who we deliver services to. And I think there are 5 questions that I've posed at the end of the document that came out to members around comments on the strategy document. I think we are asking other consultees, other stakeholders on it. So I'm happy to run through them, Chair, but I'm also happy if you want to lead on that, and I can move around as required.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I suppose if I might just open with one comment, and that is, I wondered why we hadn't had a member workshop, because I wondered whether a wider involvement of members at the developmental stage of this would have been perhaps better than bringing it along today, and would have had a wider engagement. So I wonder if in fact, when we talk about engagement, I wonder if we might have actually not passed the first test. And the first test is, have we engaged all members?
It's a fair comment, and I think part of the issue was around producing the producing the document in a draft form. It's not completed as of yet, as members will see. It's in a very draft form. I'm happy to to seek wider comments from members as we go forward. I think from my perspective, yes, it would have been it would have been beneficial. The intention originally was to take it to the previous scrutiny panel, but then we decided that we would focus wholly on quality of life as part of that. So I'm happy to take that on board. If there is a desire to do wider member engagement, then we can do so. I think as part of the process, maybe not a workshop, but in terms of a wider piece of work around that.
That's very helpful. That's my sort of key contribution for today, I have to say, because I think to be fair, I think our history on communication or engaging with communities is a bit hit and miss. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good, and we do need to get some consistency about it. And so therefore I think the strategy of this kind is welcome, but I do believe that it would be very beneficial to have a member workshop so that the wider contributions can be taken on board rather than the rather select number of members we have here today.
It's a very august select group.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. Questions? Councillor Brown.
This was quite ably illustrated recently. One, two, three. Yep.
You might have to come over to this side.
Hello?
Oh, right.
Yes, this was quite ably demonstrated recently, Mr. Chairman. We've had two consultation appraisals. One was for the local plan, the other one was for the Glaven Valley Village Conservation Area appraisal. They were done differently. One was more successful than the other. One included circulating information via volunteer deliverers in certain areas of information. The other, and also the other one used village magazines and publications in local areas, whereas the other one didn't. And there was some criticism on one of the appraisals and less criticism on the other. So it was quite ably demonstrated by that process recently. And you're quite right, I would support you in your comments that it can be a little bit hit and miss. And some regularisation and consistency would be welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brown. Any other? Councillor Holliday. I think you might have to wait for the mic. Apparently not.
On the okay, can they hear me now?
We can.
Absolutely. Measuring our engagement, Steve, as my usual area of interest, doesn't seem to be terribly smart, as Christopher would say, in terms of specific, measurable, etc., etc. So is this just a work in progress, I hope? I think you'll find in the Thriving Communities Index, there's quite a lot of stuff on communities there, with quite a lot of metrics that you could pull out that perhaps would be useful here.
It's going to be interesting. So I'm going to have to shout at you. So yes, absolutely.
Where's the music? And then we can sit down.
I'll stand up and wander. I feel like a compare. So yeah, absolutely. The strategy document itself sets out the position around a very high level in terms of we will measure our engagement. What it doesn't do is set out how and in what way. And the intention is that we will develop those metrics around measurement of it as part of the action plan. So the action plan, I think in terms of looking at a sort of framework of how we develop strategy and policy and plans and procedures, you know, we have a draft document that's under review at the moment. So I think the intention is that what I'm trying to do is follow that draft document so that what we don't do is produce something at a later stage where what we've already done is in compliance with that. So the action plan forms an appendix, but is yet to be developed. And part of the reason we've not developed it fully, there's a sort of document in the background, is on the basis that we want to get to the point where we engage others in what needs to be in the action plan, which is hence one of the questions that comes later is around, are there any ideas of things that people would like to see in the action plan? I'm taking it, Councillor Holiday, that you'd like to see the development of measurement metrics around. I'll add that in.
There. Yes, indeed. When you get the mic.
Steve, this afternoon with all that exercise. You're empowering, with my parish hat on. I don't know that I want to be empowered to develop solutions for my communities and deliver them myself. I mean, I'd like to develop the solutions, but the delivery capacity of the lowest tier of local government is quite limited. And I feel a bit with this statement at the bottom on page 11 that I'm being done to and being made to do stuff that other people should be doing for me, even though I'd like to tell you what to do. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely. And however, I would counter that by saying that's already happening in your ward. It's already happening in your ward at the moment on the basis that you have a flood warden team, which the district council doesn't have any control over in terms of setting up their evacuation plans and who is in their team and how they operate. So we've empowered them to work to a system of work that covers them under our insurance provision so that we are able to provide them with, you know, a satisfactory degree of safety and security. We provide them with kit, but in terms of designing their evacuation routes, in terms of their communications, we've left that to them. We've empowered them to operate within an umbrella activity. And I think that's what we're looking at here. We're not going to be doing empowerment all the time, but where it is appropriate, where there are a group of people, and it might not be a parish, it might be a community of interest or a community in terms of around a particular subject, where actually it is appropriate to give them the ability to go off and design for themselves what the solution might look like. So I don't think it's going to, we're not suggesting that will be used all the time, but I think, certainly there is that opportunity for those occasions to, to come forward and be really useful in terms of the community being able to have ownership of their own, whatever the community might look like, of their own solution to the issue that they face.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Councillor Gay and then Councillor Withington.
Thank you, Steve. I just wanted to say that I do recommend this strategy. It has come out of the customer focus priority, but there is a strong connection here with quality of life. There's a huge amount of research to show that a sense of voice within a community, the notion that you actually have something to say and that it will be listened to and taken into account, has huge bearing upon people's sense of themselves as part of a community. But I think perhaps even more important still, it's, I don't want to say spills over, but I can't think of anything better at the moment. It has an effect on our democratic engagement, which we all know has been dropping. Our voting figures have been dropping throughout the nation in this time, because there's an essential feeling among many residents that it doesn't matter what they think. No one cares. And I think this has the strength of laying out explicitly the levels at which we will engage with our residents. What is appropriate? Is it appropriate to consult? Is it appropriate to empower? And to think about that in a very conscious way. There's also a question here about communities, and this is a community. It's a word which is often used extremely loosely, Chairman. But this explains that there are different kinds of communities based not just simply on identity, but also upon interest. And that when we engage it's useful to engage with people who have experience of the problem and know something about it. You and I may remember times when the Audit Commission simply drew people in off the street, gave them £10 and, you know, asked them a load of questions which might have no bearing upon them at all. They might not even live in the district. They might just be coming shopping from somewhere else. So I think this allows us to embark on it in a much more conscious and effective way. And it may be that member involvement and the member briefing might be better at the action plan level, where we think about sophisticated measurements, as Councillor Holliday has suggested. Anyway, I think it's a good piece of work, and I thanks everyone for reading it, because the beauty of consulting the Scrutiny Committee is that everybody reads their papers. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I would endorse some of the points that you've made, and often a phrase that's said to me is, what's the point? And that is a reflection, I think, of the level of public confidence that it has in an organisation. And we do need to rebuild that. And I think if this document, and I have to say no criticism of the document as it stands, but I'm no expert on this at all. And I do believe that wider member input and engagement, if you like, would be appropriate before we dry the ink on this. Because I think if we are going to tackle that very problem, then we need to have something which was saying this is the kind of template that we are going to work with. Not that we can't be flexible around that, but this is the kind of consistency that we are aiming to achieve. So thank you for that. Councillor Whittington.
Thank you. Some of my points, I think, come out from what Councillor Gay was just saying. On page 31, you've got, we use the outcomes to inform our policy and strategy development and delivery of services, which for me is probably one of the most important things of this, that the engagement that we do results in a reaction of some kind to the work that we do. However, you use it twice on that page, but I don't think it follows throughout the document, that sense of importance of that. So I don't know whether that's something that can be looked at. And there's sort of an inconsistency in some of the pages, in that it's in there on some pages and not in there on others. It just refers to projects or proposals. And I think we need to have a sense of consistency in that across the purpose of the engagement. I had a comment also similar to Councillor Holliday's, but it also links to being a rock star like Councillor Dixon. If we could link it more to the comms team as well, so it's more of a coordinated approach in here, because engagement is dependent to some extent on our comms team. So I wondered with that, and then linked to that as well, I know from when we did the communication strategy, there was some, and Joe Ferrari was here, he was talking about some really specific statistics of what he wanted to happen. So we have got some targets there that are very measurable, how many people engage with the website, etc. So I think there's a natural link there, and I would like to see that pulled out more if possible, and I don't know whether others agree on that. And another thing that it's come up in our parish council actually about, on here on all our reports, we have something about crime prevention. We're legally obliged to, aren't we, on our thing? And I wonder if that's an opportunity for us to think about every report that comes to council has to have considered the community engagement and cover any opportunities being missed for it, because that would actually really focus on, you know, ensuring that we are doing that engagement. So there were just 3 points to think about.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Penfold.
Thank you, Steve. I'm just looking at page 7, so page 35 in our papers, around community of identity. And I think we just, you know, need to tread very carefully there in what we say and how we identify people.
particularly when we're saying how society identifies them. We're talking about usually being identified by demographics, but then we list groups that aren't particularly identified that way, other than young and old people. So I'm just wondering, have we had any advice on that? From whom have we had advice on that particular area? Because it is one, I think, where we need to just be very careful and considered in how we define communities and groups of people. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it's probably an area we need to just finalise, but it has been taken from that's been taken from a number of other examples of documents where we have used the same phraseology and language, and they are. I mean, basically, it's any group that identifies themselves as a belonging or attributable to a particular, to a particular group, by definition of how they view themselves. So I don't think any of those are significantly controversial. I did take out some of the bits that perhaps are more on the extreme to reflect North Norfolk, but yeah, I'm happy to look at them again and just take some advice from elsewhere if yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I wasn't, suggesting that we should take anything out at all. It's just, getting the wording right there, really. And forgive my ignorance on this, but do we have an officer who is responsible for sort of diversity like that and looking at those particular areas, different community groups?
Not specifically, but it does fall within people services, and we have officers who have quite a lot of experience and lead on that sort of equality and diversity and inclusion agenda. Obviously, we have an equality, diversity and inclusion strategy now. So we'll make sure that those. Thank you. It's really useful feedback. We'll make sure those marry up with what we define in some of the other areas. Yeah, they have been cited on it and have been able to comment and come back on it. So yeah, they have been involved.
Right, are we all done? Okay,
Chair,
if we are.
Just in terms of the questions, because I'm conscious of the fact that we've had a really good discussion here, but we haven't actually necessarily answered the questions in the document around those.
Might the questions actually be appropriate for the workshop?
So if you are content, I'm happy to do that. What I would say is obviously what the impact of that will be is that it will add another session of time in terms of arranging that and going through it. I'm more than happy to do that because I think it's a really good piece, but obviously it will delay the adoption of this piece of work. But if you're content, then we can sort of workshop to that end.
Well, it did seem to me that there was a measure of support for the member workshop. So I would have thought that the time to raise those questions and perhaps dig into those and get that wider engagement would be in that workshop. The other point that I picked up is for an inclusion of whatever we believe to be appropriate in terms of metrics and targets, so that we embrace those as well. So I wonder if that particular matter can be carried over to the workshop as well, so that it's discussed in the wider sphere.
I will be speaking to Councillor Holliday about that as well, because she's now my new favourite person about discussing metrics with. So,
well, Councillor Withington raised it as well, actually, as another one. So you've got more than one, but you may well have some valuable input from that. So I think the main recommendation is one of a workshop, a seminar, a workshop, member workshop, to take this matter forward. And I'm not sure that we would want to draw any more defined from that.
But you're broadly content with the approach?
I haven't picked up any dissatisfaction with what's been written. I just think that what's been written hasn't been road tested amongst members and that wider input. And I think that there are those, some of those points that have been brought out today, you may have more points brought out in the member workshop.
Thank you.
Are you content with that?
Yeah, if you just take a vote on the request.
We will. We will. So could I have a proposer then and a seconder for a recommendation to hold a member workshop? And that member workshop would include some of the more detailed points that have been raised today. I've got Councillor Penfold and Councillor Brown. Could I have a show of hands then, please? Thank you. That looks like unanimous to me. Right, okay, I'm mindful that we're past our sort of 11:30 time. We've got one more substantive item to include, to cover, and then we've got the supporting members of items of delegated decisions and our work programme. Would members would like to take a 5-minute break, or would you be content to continue? Continue? Continue. Right, okay then. Brevity is the word then, again. Right, okay, and then moving forward then to the item of urgent business. This is to consider the Levelling Up Fund, round 2. Mr. Blatch.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. So this item has been brought to you as urgent business this morning because time is of the essence in terms of the programme deadlines for applications that have been announced by the government. So at the end of March, the government issued its revised or new Levelling Up prospectus for round 2 for the Levelling Up Fund. And obviously there's more expanded in terms of government direction of travel in the Queen's speech yesterday with the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill that is proposed to be taken through Parliament in the next few months. But this programme continues or repeats a grant funding scheme that was operated in 2021. There were 105 successful bids at that time submitted. And in the prospectus that was announced in March of this year, the status of North Norfolk has increased from a priority 2 area to a priority 1 area. And we've been, as that designation has been awarded to us, there is also some capacity building funding to support the development of good quality proposals and applications. So in that context, I think there is a green light or an expectation from government that the authority would look to submit some proposals for funding through the Levelling Up Round 2 Fund. So the Cabinet has considered the objectives of the programme. It's looked at the successful projects that were approved under Round 1 of the fund. There's been some challenge and scrutiny around the issues which underpin the council's or the district's economic structures, constraints and opportunities. Many of the biggest constraints that we have are around utility provision and the viability of development. Many of those issues, the authority isn't in direct control of itself. So anything to do with electricity capacity, I think you've heard this morning from Anglian Water, their investment plan is a 5-year one. So those changes generally require regulatory framework approval. So there's some constraints around what the authority can directly do in that regard. There's also been discussions in this chamber over many times around the supply of industrial land and premises and the challenges that the authority faces in that regard. But the wish of the programme objective and fund is that applications that are successful, projects are delivered within a 2-year window. So there's an aspiration to see the projects delivered quickly on the ground. So therefore, by March 2025, in exceptional circumstances, 12 months later by March 2026. So the Cabinet has looked with myself and corporate leadership team the opportunities that exist locally, and also the expenditure the authority is making at the present time through other programmes directly and with other government and external sources of funding, and has proposed, on the basis of previous public consultation, particularly in Fakenham around the Community Renewal Fund bid last year that was unsuccessful. There's very strong support for community investment in sports provision and a swimming pool in Fakenham, and conversations have been had with the Town Council around whether we can make that investment a reality through this fund. Looking at land that's in the control of the Town Council alongside our existing dry sports centre at Trap Lane in Fakenham, which is operated under our leisure contract by Everyone Active. So there's a very strong community proposal there that I think has community support and would deliver something that's very significant and valued by the community in improving health and well-being, participation in sport in a part of the district which is, and if not the county, which is under provided for in that regard. So there's a proposal to develop a proposition at Fakenham for a 25-metre pool. We would need to scope that project, whether it's a 4 or 6 lane pool. There's also a desire from the community for outdoor 2G hockey facilities to a competitive standard to meet, again, a local need which exists but cannot be met in the northwest of the county. Other facilities that the existing team plays on are at Linsport and in the outskirts of Norwich. So nothing that can meet that need in the Fakenham and wider rural hinterland area. So there's a proposition to pursue a project in the Broadland constituency area for Fakenham, and then consideration was given to the opportunities that exist in the Norfolk constituency. And after some considerable consideration and reflection, particularly around deliverability and the programme objectives, it was felt that the project with the best chance of success would be an investment in public open space in Cromer, where this authority has liabilities, assets and obligations. We haven't been able to invest in those assets in recent years, like many authorities, because we have wider responsibility, and we've invested in the prom and the pier, we've invested in the town centre, but the sunken gardens on Runton Road, public gardens, and indeed North Lodge Park have been underinvested in a considerable period of time, and there seems to be a major opportunity to use this external funding for those investments, which would support the wider tourism economy, in jobs and private investment, which we're seeing being made in the town and wider tourism offer. The government has previously funded through many funding schemes similar initiatives in other coastal towns around the country, and so it's proposed that further consideration is given to developing a bid as outlined in the report. The timescale for this is incredibly tight. We have just looked at establishing internal project teams to develop these propositions further with community engagement, with local stakeholders, so Fakenham Town Council, Sport England, Active Norfolk and Everyone Active in terms of the Fakenham proposition, Cromer Town Council and the Friends of North Lodge Park in respect to the Cromer proposition. And there would be a very significant amount of work to be undertaken in submitting good quality bids in the next 8 weeks for submission to government on the 6th of July. I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction on that. Before I open it for wider questions and consultation, my greatest concern, I have to say, is one involving process, priorities and distribution. And I make no comment with regard to the two proposals, either pro or con. But I do wonder whether, if you looked east of North Walsham, East of North Walsham, I have to say, doesn't seem to figure very often, and I don't know why that is. I'm getting some support from those members from the east of North Walsham, but I think if you were to ask those members east of North Walsham and the residents east of North Walsham, you would hear something that might not gel very well with what's in this paper. And I do wonder why we don't have almost a call-off list of projects, and perhaps this comes back to this community engagement, whereby I would like personally to see during times when we perhaps don't have funding schemes waiting to be loaded, why don't we consult the town and parish councils? Why don't we consult organisations with regard to across the district projects that they would like to see brought forward, and perhaps some of them would be capable of being made what I would call shovel ready, or at least ready in ready in outline, and why we have to do this sort of thing at the last minute, because it doesn't look good, I have to say, when I look across the district. And I'm not, as I said, commenting on either of the two proposals that you've made, but I'm simply saying that I think that from a process point of view and a priorities point of view and how it is distributed across the district, I'm not comfortable with what I'm reading, but I'll rest my comment at that. Questions? Councillor Bathway.
It was actually the question I was going to ask was, can the east of the region be prioritised the next time a tranche of funding becomes available? I feel the east of our district is, and I would support the chair on this, does feel ignored. And I would like to ask if we can actually put in motion that the next time a tranche of funding becomes available, the east of this area gets priority, please.
Could I just add something to what you've said? And that is not the next time, because I think the next time may be too late, because the timescales on this kind of thing are too late in lots of cases. The time to do it is many months in advance, so that you've actually done the consultation, you know what the kind of feelings are and the support for it, and you know something about the outline of it, and therefore you don't have that much work to do. So you can have them on a call-off list. And
so what you're saying, if I'm right, is you would like to see a project on the stocks, as it were, ready to go.
I think that's in fairness to what the Chief Executive has said with regard to timescale, that's the only way we can get something, if you like, ready, sort of almost ready prepared, but at least available to say, okay, we'll just look across the district and say, we can pick one from the east, one from the west, one from central, or wherever it is, according to priorities, of course. There's a lot of balancing to be done here, but I think that's what I see as the thing that's missing here, and I find it very regrettable. But so just to modify what you've said.
Yeah, and I think poverty needs to be considered a centre as well as staff.
I couldn't possibly say that, but thank you for saying so. Councillor Kershaw, and then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak. I think the problem...
oh, I beg your pardon. I'm sorry, I didn't see.
Councillor Cushing.
Councillor Cushing, Councillor Kershaw. And then we must get the batting order right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that. I'll keep it brief, if I may. It comes as no surprise that I strongly support the Fakenham bid with regard to the Broadland constituency application. there is a really desperate need for a pool in the town. I think it's about 8 years since the last swimming pool was closed. The nearest swimming pools to Fakenham are in Dereham and in Wells, which means there's a large swathe of population in that part of the county centred on Fakenham, for which there is no easy pool provision. If I go back half a century now, I actually learned to swim in a pool in Fakenham. And I think if you look at the opportunities for youngsters in the town now, that is something that is denied to them unless their parents take them to, I say, Wells, Dereham, or anyone else further afield. So I would like to do that. I'd also like to strongly support the provision of a 2G pitch as well, which you mentioned, the CEO mentioned that it could be used for hockey, but I understand that and I'm no expert on this, but I understand 2G pitches can also be used for other sports as well. This really does tie in with the vision. If you look at where this would be located, would be in an area called Trap Lane, which is in the north part of town in my ward. It's not only close to the Fakenham Academy, not only close to the sports centre, but it's also going to be right on the doorstep of the Fakenham extension, which in due course will see the provision of 80 or 1,500 homes as well. And it really is tied to the vision for members of the town council how to really create sport facilities in that area of the town. And one thing that's come back from me time to get from residents is there's very little for youngsters to do in the evenings in the town. That even comes up from the beat officer as well, because he says that does cause trouble with a small minority of people in the town. So again, all of this come together really deliver huge benefits for the area. So on that basis, I'd like to support that. I would be interested to find out a little bit more as we go, not necessarily here, but from Councillor Kershaw and the CEO about actually the organisation, as how the bids can be put together, and the engagement of the key stakeholders in the town council. We mentioned listed a number of others here, but how that will work together and putting together sort of the cost benefit cases would be of great interest to me. Thank you.
Councillor Kershaw, when the mic reaches you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Chair. I don't dispute that there is a need for these projects in the east of the area. And I think what is incumbent on us is actually to start to plan what those needs are. So we can, if the timescales of these coming forward are, in my mind, too short, and that's a problem. We're struggling around to find a shovel-ready proposal that will pass is very difficult. On this occasion, working with Fakenham and the Town Council, they have existing designs. They have designs for the sports. We had done a previous paper in 2015 about the needs of Fakenham, and I think it serves a need. Certainly, I mean, I think the leader has now visited the East on a couple of occasions, and we need to sit down and start looking and working out plans for them so that if and when the next round comes, there is obviously a priority there. And while I've got the microphone, just touching on the fact at the same scale, we have the Shared Prosperity Fund coming through, which is worth £1.26 million to NNDC over the next 3 years. Again, we have a very tight schedule to accommodate. I have done some work with the Chief Exec, Rob Young and Stuart Quick. What I'd like to propose here is that we hold a members briefing in the next 3 weeks to be able to go through the options with members to explain what the limitations and options are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to pick up on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, there was recently a study done by the Rural Services Network that highlighted that historically there's been consistent underfunding in rural areas. Compared with urban areas, it's 38% down, or £105 per head of population. So before we get carried away thinking that it's a panacea, that there's probably room for improvement. I just want to echo what Councillor Kershaw said about timescales here. We're looking, if we're asking for tenders and the like. I don't quite know what the process involves running up to the 6th of July, but it seems to have been rolled out, this, whilst it's very welcome funding, with somewhat indecent haste. And the other point I'd just ask about is when this came to Cabinet, to what extent were possible potential schemes east of North Walsham on all fours with the programme criteria? I think we're looking at this slightly blind, members on this committee, compared to the information that Cabinet have had available to them. I certainly haven't looked at the requirements of the scheme in any detail. Speaking personally, I don't know if other members of the committee have done that or not, but I certainly haven't.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to respond, Mr. Black?
So in terms of the east of the district and whether that is geographically defined in any sense, in terms of the levelling up agenda and data, that part of the district is not, or large parts of that part of the district, perhaps not so Hickling and Haysborough wards, but certainly if we look at the Hovton and Tunstead ward and the St Bennett's ward, in terms of index of multiple deprivation and other indicators, those areas would not score highly in terms of need, in terms of the programme objectives. And this is a national programme. And I think if you look at, anybody saw BBC News last night, there was a story from Stoke-on-Trent with very large numbers of empty retail units, very low footfall, and there was almost tumbleweed blowing down the street. And thankfully, North Norfolk doesn't experience those problems. I think, as Councillor Brown has said, we experience different challenges in terms of our rurality, but this programme is competitive. There is a set government budget and there will be strong competition, and therefore we have to make some difficult decisions around how we use our limited resources to develop bids that have the strongest chance of success. That isn't to say there isn't need in the east of the district, and I think over time, and perhaps there is an issue of communication or promotion or understanding some of those challenges, but it's an incredibly special environment, the Broads, so it presents its own challenges. We've obviously done a lot of work with the Environment Agency and the I think it's called the Broadland Abstraction Group, in terms of proposed removal of abstraction licenses and what that means for farming and agricultural businesses and food processing businesses in that part of the county. Myself and Councillor Blathwaite were at a presentation last Thursday, I believe, in terms of a pilot project to look at electrification of Broad's hire cruisers and the infrastructure that would be needed to promote such a pilot. We are talking to the Museum of the Broads around a Changing Places investment in that facility in terms of inclusive tourism, and the Development Committee recently approved significant developments in Stalham for housing with extra care and affordable housing. So it is around positioning the authority and our communities to take specific advantages of the opportunities of the funding programmes and initiatives that are right for place. We have looked previously at servicing employment land in the Stalham area and providing increased electricity supply into Catfield Industrial Estate. The return on investment and the certainty around demand did not wash its face for those sort of investments. And that's a challenge that we do face, not just in that part of the district, but in other parts of the district as well. So I hear what the chairman has said. I think we can do better in terms of sharing our understanding of some of those issues with local communities in the East. But in terms of this funding programme, I don't think it was well aligned for us to see a successful bid in that part of the district at this time.
Thank you for that. I just will respond to that. I think I recognise, and probably all of us in the chamber recognise, that we are where we are with respect to this situation now. It's just that I think that you need to have an understanding of what maybe members might like to see in terms of what would a good paper look like. And I think a good paper would look like a choice of number of projects across the district, so that it was covering the priorities, covering the issues that you've said, and that work be done in advance, well, so that we don't have what I would call that rush to get things finished to meet the deadline. And I do take the point that, you know, that's not a good way of rolling out national schemes. But I do think that and this is why I looked at the process and say, I would have liked there to have been a range of projects, and that you could have logically argued your way through them. And at the moment, you know, I can't go back to anybody east of North Walsham and say, well, the reason why you didn't get your project approved was X or Y, because it's not there. And that's where that preparation work needs to be done in advance. And certainly in the wards of Stalham, Sutton and Catfield, I believe that there is significant potential there that needs to be tapped into. And the time to do that is not now. It should have been done long ago, or it needs to be done in the coming months or year or two, or before you get a scheme come along. And I think that's one of the key things that I would like to see from this paper. I've got three further speakers: Councillor Holliday, Councillor Penfold, and Councillor Gay.
Thank you. Chairman, are we going to take these separately, or are we going to be required to vote on these together? Because
Are we
going to be voting on these together, or
we haven't
separately?
decided.
Because I feel very strongly that I couldn't support the Chroma endeavour, I'm afraid. I feel as if we're being shoehorned into these ideas, very much like you. And I don't see that levelling up in Chroma actually is going to be levelling up for North Norfolk as a whole, and I'm very uncomfortable.
That's a view we'll have to take.
Investing in Chroma Pier is quite what perhaps Michael Gove was thinking of, but I don't have any comfort with that. And I know you've compared this to other coastal towns which have been rejuvenated to their huge advantage, but do we know that we're are they good comparators for us? I don't know. I don't feel comfortable at all with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Penfold.
Thank you. Just a linked thought, really, just to encourage members in the East, our Eastern members, if they could raise awareness of our own fund, Sustainable Communities Fund. I know we're not talking about the same levels of funding here, but we are talking about grants that do make a substantial positive difference to communities, very much so. And we actually see very few applications coming in from the East. So if you could advocate on behalf of that fund to your parish councils, your community groups. Last year, just looking at the map, the report from last year, we had one application east of Worcester. So that's quite a big chunk of the district. We had one application, and that was from Stalham, and that was successful, and that got the maximum grant of 15,000. So, you know, that is sort of a good sizable grant, but we're not seeing those applications coming in from the East. We are from the West and the centre, so to speak. So just a thought there that we have funding available ourselves for things that do make a difference. Thank you. I look forward to it.
I take your point. Unfortunately, the schemes that certainly I have in mind would be way in excess of those, and I'm not even sure whether the tranches of money that we get through as we have now would cover the projects in the same way as the Fakenham project isn't covered by, but at least it gets it rolling, gets it on the stocks. That's what it needs. Councillor Gay.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say that in my time as a councillor, I've experienced the same thing that you have done, and as Councillor Kershaw has mentioned. These funding streams come forward with very short timescales, and yet working up a project takes months, if not years. And if you think about the previous item we were discussing, consultation, that tiny non-technical element of a project plays out over months. And if we were to do it properly, as the draft strategy suggests, with communities of interest and identity gone to directly, that you can see how long that would take. But I'd just like to say that I really do support the Fakenham swimming pool project. If we're talking about inclusivity, which we often do here, there are few things more inclusive than swimming for people of all ages, all physical abilities and conditions. And I feel pretty similarly about the Woodlands project in the Cromer, because our woodlands and gardens, again, are there for everyone. No one needs a particular talent or physical ability to enjoy them. So, but especially the swimming pool, very good project.
Thank you for that. Yes, I've been careful not to get into the pros and cons of the two projects, because I don't think that's probably that helpful. That's why I've concentrated on process and what we might be able to do better in the future and what we should be looking for. This is probably a reflection of the fact we are where we are, a pragmatic position, I think, and I'm not sure that I could actually summarise the situation any more than that. Councillor Kershaw. I think you might well be the last.
That's right. Thank you. I think the problem for us is, having read through the 374 pages of levelling up documents, and then when you get the specific offer, we're at level 1, we have to look through what the aims of the government are with this particular level. And the problem is then fitting projects within the aims. And from my point of view, from a pragmatic point of view, I'd rather have 2 projects that get through than none, because we don't fit the parameters. And that is the particular problem we're facing in the competition we're having with other towns through the North and the Midlands, where their deprivation is far greater than ours. So trying to find a scheme to fit is the most important thing. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen in round 2, and we don't know what's going to happen in round 3. I hope we have a longer time scale. I don't have any faith that we will. In terms of seaside development, following on with Whitty's report, there is deprivation in the seaside, and there is deprivation in Cromer. We know that Great Yarmouth have benefited greatly from funding. It's not, you can't directly compare. They have a different form of deprivation, but they have had many millions of pounds to develop seaside and winter gardens, etc. So I'd leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. I take your point about we need to have participate, and we need, better to have 2 than none. I would rather there was 12 actually, and that gives us flexibility not only across the district, but flexibility in theme as well, because some of them are undoubtedly to meet the varying criteria. Having a good selection out there to at least be able to call on them. Understood. Right. Okay. I'm not sure. This is really a pre-scrutiny item, I think, isn't it, Mr. Blatch?
It's for information.
Information. Okay. So there is no specific recommendation that we've got before us today, but is there anything you would like us to?
and ultimately this is a decision for the cabinet. There's a funding opportunity that's been presented. The timescales for us to bring timely reports to you in terms of the window between now and the 6th of July for the levelling up fund round 2 and the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which needs the local investment plan, which needs to be submitted
by the 1st of August, was such that we felt it was important to bring this item here for you today. It is something that the Cabinet will, or has tasked us to develop with local stakeholders in terms of submitting strong bids. I believe that we are able to do that. Councillor Kershaw has said that in terms of the more detailed consideration that can be given to local investment strategy or plan for the UK Shared Prosperity Fund money, that he would propose having a member workshop so that the issues there can be explored. Because there's a list of 40 interventions which the government has suggested local partnerships might wish to consider, and I do believe that we're in a fortunate position that a number of those don't really apply to North Norfolk in terms of community pride, littering, graffiti, levels of antisocial behaviour. Our needs as a rural community are somewhat different, and we need to align our prospectus that says what our ask is under that fund, and that might be around rural accessibility to education and training. It might be local marketing initiatives to support a reduction in red tape and process around street-based markets and fairs, so that individual towns can have more flexibility in street closures and organising themed events, farmers markets, which would apply to all of our towns as an opportunity moving forward. So I think the conversation which Councillor Kershaw referred to on Friday with myself and Stuart Quick and Rob Young did go through that list of interventions, and I think the intention of the workshop is to share those interventions and to promote a discussion around which members here feel would have the best opportunity of presenting a strong plan or in the strategy to government under that funding programme, which has to be by the 1st of August.
Okay, thank you. So perhaps it might be appropriate and might be helpful for some of the comments that we've covered today being forwarded to Cabinet for consideration in the future. And one of those certainly is the member briefing, and certainly is to make sure that we've got schemes developed in principle for the future, and that yes, I think we need to, it would be really good to have a process which demonstrates across the district that we are mindful of what there is that needs to be done, and picking up on the consultation process, the engagement process, all of that I think would be served well if we could in the future develop a list, whether we call it a local investment plan or what we call it, is neither here to me, or I don't mind, but I think something along those lines would certainly go down very much better across the district. So, okay, we're just required to note this then, and if those comments can go forward to Cabinet for consideration. Right. Moving on then to item 13, officer delegated decisions. That's at page 45 to 48. Any comments on those?
Yes, we do have if there are any questions.
I think the only comment that I would raise in respect to the mileage rates, I wondered if any thought had been given to consultation with other local authorities so that we harmonise those across the organisations.
I think
So I think that's a decision that's been taken under delegated powers through consultation between the Cabinet and the Director of Resources to reflect the nature of this district and the costs that officers incur in undertaking site visits. There is, in terms of each individual local authority, whilst we are members or do sign up to, most of our contracts are through the National Pay and Grading Scheme. There is obviously the need for us to be mindful of remuneration and costs, and it was felt an appropriate issue to address as a short-term need and is under, or the ability to be reviewed going forward.
And in the matter of consultation with other organisations, did I?
I don't. I'm not. We consulted with Unison within North Norfolk. I don't know why we would need to consult with other organisations or the relevance of that. It's a decision that this authority can take as a competent body in itself.
That's only a question. That obviously didn't happen.
No, I don't think it did happen. It was a response that there was consultation, as I say, with Unison here and around concern around cost of living crisis. What I can say is that there is a pay review undergoing in terms of regional through the East of England Local Government Association, which we're participating in, such that there can be benchmarking. I think in terms of other local authorities in Norfolk and East of England, our rates of pay for many job roles are at the lower end of that, and that is something that the HR manager, James Claxton, is reviewing such that we can maintain our position in the marketplace for what is an increasingly tight labour market for many job roles, and that is across the local government sector and the wider economy.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Toy.
Just very quickly, Mr. Chairman, I think on some get here. It was just at the cabinet meeting where that was brought forward. It was also asked about taxation, check on, and actually the numbers are quite small because we have to pay to a pool of budget considerations. It's actually quite a relatively small amount. And it was considered unique because of the rurality of that. Just if an officer's got to travel for 1 year to be on this one,
Okay, thank you. Any other comments in relation to these officer delegated decisions? Are we just required to note them? Okay, thank you. Happy to note them. Right, if we can move then on to the work programme, I believe is at 14, Overview and Scrutiny Work Programme setting for 22-23. Matt. Yes, you need the mic, don't you?
Yeah, so there's a draft work programme included for consideration. It has essentially everything you would expect to see there in terms of regulatory items and those items that you've previously asked to be added to the work programme that kind of happen on an annual basis. So that's things like the review of car parking usage, beach huts and chalets, that kind of thing, and work we have ongoing there, stuff like monitoring of the HAS project, etc. You will notice there's some items on there which are listed as cabinet recommendations. So we are trying to streamline the way that we work as a committee slightly. So rather than looking at next month's meeting, we've got debt management and treasury management annual reports on there. They're not something that usually warrant a great deal of discussion. So rather than putting them on there as a full report for full discussion, we will just put them on there as something that's been a cabinet recommendation, and the committee will be there to indicate support of whether that goes to council and proceeds as scrutiny recommendations are dealt with at cabinet and council, essentially just to show agreement. Of course, the reports can still be included on the agenda, so if there are questions that arise, they can be dealt with. The other things to mention are, in terms of this work programme, you'll note that we've got fairly busy agenda plan for the next few months. However, going forward, there are 4 items that were proposed for consideration. So just an indication of whether you as a committee are supportive of those items and whether they have a place on the work programme in some form or another. So they are looking at coastal protection, the maintenance of sea defences and impact of coastal erosion on residents. That's not something the committee has looked at in great deal previously, other than obviously the sandscaping project. Mental health services were raised as a possibility. They've just had a very poor CQC rating. I will note on that one that that is obviously the responsibility of the HOSC. The issue is that, as with ambulance response times, the work of HOSC often has to focus on the county at large, and North Norfolk can be overlooked. So I think we might need to just keep an eye on that one and consider how that is dealt with by HOSC and the representatives. Something that was raised previously is an economic development strategy. I'm going to look at Richard here. I think that's still in development. Yeah, so I expect that will come through at some point, and I have no doubt that will be on the agenda for pre-scrutiny or something similar. And then also finally, just and it's been mentioned several times today, cost of living crisis. This is something obviously that impacts all residents, and it's really open there if the committee want to look at what the council is doing to help that and what more could be done. So they're the proposed additional items there. If any of the members of the committee have a view on those, it'd be interesting to hear those, and otherwise it's up to you to approve that draft work programme as is.
Okay. Are you happy to approve? Looks as I'm getting nods of approval.
Yes, we'll do that in the update. So this, yes.
Okay. Right. So no questions? Do you want a proposer and a seconder?
Yes, please. Yeah.
A proposer and a seconder, please, for that. I've got Councillor Fisher and Councillor Brown. Show of hands then, please. That looks like unanimous to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to the other work programme.
Yep. So just briefly looking over the cabinet work programme, I think there's a number of things that have been discussed today that will be going forward to cabinet in June. So obviously the Parklands transaction, the engagement strategy, if that still meets that same time frame with a workshop in between, the other assistance schemes in there. So there's essentially no surprises there as far as I'm concerned. We have looked at those things. In terms of the overview and scrutiny update, there's 2 points to raise. The first I will deal with relatively quickly. The second might have some input from John Toy. The first is just to note that there is an annual review of appointments to outside bodies. Last year, Overview and Scrutiny Committee, you made a recommendation on the appointment to NHOSC, which I believe was Councillor Emma Spagnola with Councillor Victoria Holiday as substitute. Essentially looking to ask the committee whether you're happy to continue with those appointments as is, or if there's any suggested changes, essentially, because it's one that as it's a Overview and Scrutiny Committee and it's an Overview and Scrutiny appointment, it's deemed appropriate that appointment is at least recommended by the committee.
Well, I'm conscious that Councillor Spagnola isn't here, so.
Yes, it's a difficulty. I think on that basis.
Councillor Holiday, would you be happy to continue in the role that you have? So subject to confirmation from Councillor Spagnola. Does anybody ever have any other observations? No.
I don't think there's any
subject to confirmation.
Yeah,
from
I don't think there's no clear indication of anyone wishing to change that. So
no.
Unless we hear otherwise from Councillor Spagnola, we'll carry on that recommendation as previous.
Okay.
The second point I will hand over to John Toy. This is sorry, in relation to the planning customer experience survey.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So,
is it going to be quick, John?
Yes, I'll make it very quick, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure we all need to go on. Basically, I came to you a short while ago seeing if we could get the survey done early because of nutrient neutrality. The officers put in a great deal of work to get that ready. Unfortunately, because of GDPR regulations, the council was not able to carry that out. I've reviewed that with officers, and it was felt that to go to people and say, could we, and only get a percentage return, and then to do it again, and we were looking at diminishing returns. The officer capacity, having given up time to produce it, needed to catch up. We're dealing with nutrient neutrality, new plan, conservation area appraisals. So there wasn't really the officer capacity to do it. What I'd like to just ask that the committee is confirm that they're still happy that we will come back in September with a customer experience strategy. We will carry out surveys around that time, depending on how nutrient neutrality falls. With the plan is to have the plan with you by December. Is that as I believe it, that's back to where we were originally, or there or thereabouts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are we content to accept that, given the situation that we're presented with? No dissension on that, so it looks as though you've got agreement, Councillor Toy.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else to add, Chair.
Nothing you want to add? Okay, right. Would you like us to note those work programs?
Yep.
With a proposer and a seconder?
Yes.
Could I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Brathwaite and Councillor Heinrich. Show of hands, please, to accept those work programs. Thank you. That looks like unanimous to me. Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed. That concludes the. We have no items on the agenda beyond this. So thank you very much indeed for everybody for your contribution today. And I formally close the meeting. The target I had was 12:30, but we were 15 minutes late getting started. So